brain because I took a cognitive test and I aced it. I got a perfect mark, which you would be incapable of doing.
There are many, many very important issues that face us as a country related to the dangers that Donald Trump poses to the country. The clear and present danger economically, militarily, socially, culturally, just everything. He is just a nightmare. But one of the most pressing is his health. One of the most pressing is his cognitive decline, his inability to do the job, even if he weren't the danger that he is. He's still incapable of doing the job because of the problems that he faces and has faced for many years. We're now witnessing the steady decline of Donald Trump. He can't even stay awake during high-level foreign meetings. He can't stay awake in the Oval Office during any period of time. He's asleep most of the time in what he does. Yesterday on Air Force One on the way back to Washington, D.C., after spending, like he does every single weekend, outside of the city, he was asked at the very end about his MRI. And reporters, justifiably so, want to know what part of the body, what were they looking at? What measure of ill health are you in that you need an MRI? He rambles, he rants, he insults, he points to his cognitive test, the giraffe, tiger, duck, horse, connect the dots. And he tells the reporter that you'd be incapable of passing that test. That the young lady who's a reporter would be incapable of passing a test that signals early onset or just what stage of cognitive decline through Alzheimer's you have. Fantastic. But we've got that. And also, Tim Walz is now again sounding off after his text from last week, his tweet from last week, requesting, demanding, putting into the ether, release the MRI results. It is something we really need to know about. Here is our addled, demented, violently aggressive president, war criminal president, Donald Trump, shitting on the press for asking very serious questions about his health.
They asked about my MRI. MRIs are very...
Governor Walz asked you to release the MRI records.
Will you tell us what it was
Governor
for?
Walz, you mean the incompetent governor? So if they want to release it, it's okay with me to release it. It's perfect.
What were they
It's
looking
like my
for?
phone call where I got impeached. It's absolutely perfect. So if you want to hear about it or if you want to release it, you want to have it released.
Yes,
News Nation, failing News Nation.
No, sir, not failing.
News Nation is doing lousy, by the way. But if you want to have it released, I'll release it.
Please, can you tell us what they were looking at?
For what, releasing?
No. What part of your body was the MRI looking
I
at?
have no idea. It was just an MRI. What part of the body? It wasn't the brain because I took a cognitive test and I aced it. I got a perfect mark, which you would be incapable of doing. Goodbye, everybody. You too.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir.
You heard it. If they want to release it, release it. Do you hear that? I'm sure that this is not official. They're going to need his signature from his healthcare providers. But it's interesting that rather than just answer the questions on their face, he has to resort to failing News Nation. It's failing the News Nation. Attacking them. Can you tell us what they were looking at? What part of your body was the MRI looking? I have no idea. Doesn't really bode well. Doesn't imbue us with confidence in your cognition, Donald Trump, when you have no idea. And again, being someone who has had multiple MRIs, both on physical attributes like injured shoulders, but also when I had cancer, you know where the MRI is being taken. You don't say, I don't know. All I do know is it wasn't my brain. It wasn't? Are you sure? No one said it was your brain. You're volunteering that it wasn't your brain really leads us to believe that it was your brain, Donald Trump. It couldn't have been that because I've taken cognitive tests and I aced him. I knew exactly where the tiger was. I knew exactly where the horse was. Oh, and I knew that was a duck. You can't fool old Donald. And I aced it. You wouldn't be able to ace it. You'd be incapable of doing goodbye, everyone, as he runs away and the White House clip fades to black. Very theatrical, very poignant, as the reporters grovel and say, "Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, sir, for your time." Unnecessary. Now, there are some rational, decent leaders in the United States of America. One of those being the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, former vice presidential nominee for the Democratic Party. And he has been demanding the MRI results be released to the public. We have a right to know. You don't get your privacy of your health conditions when you're the president of the United States, and so much weighs on you. So much you are responsible for. We want to know if we have a demented octogenarian in the White House with the nuclear codes, an already malign, malignant, malevolent force on the body politic of the world. Here's Tim Walz talking to Kristen Welker about the release of the MRI.
Governor, let me have you weigh in on this, because part of your initial response to President Trump's post was to call for him to release the results of his MRI. And I want to give you a chance to give our viewers exactly a sense of what you mean. What exactly were you suggesting by that, Governor?
Well, here we got a guy on Thanksgiving where we spent time with our families, we ate, we played Yahtzee, we cheered for football or whatever. This guy is apparently in a room ranting about everything else. This is not normal behavior. It is not healthy. And presidents throughout time have released a couple things. They've released their tax returns, not Donald Trump, and they've released their medical records, not Donald Trump. And look, the MRI is one thing, but I think what's most concerning about this is, as your viewers out there are listening, has anyone in the history of the world ever have an MRI assigned to them and have no idea what it was for, as he says? So look, it's clear the president's fading physically. I think the mental capacity, again, ranting, crazily at midnight on Thanksgiving about everything else. There's reasons for us to be concerned. This is a guy that randomly says the airspace over Venezuela is closed. He's ruminating on if you could win a nuclear war. Look, this is a serious position. It's the most powerful position in the world. And we have someone at midnight throwing around slurs that demonize our children. And at the same time, he's not solving any of the problems. So I'm deeply concerned that he is incapable of doing the job.
Look, anger, frustration, the inability to cope because you're confused a lot of the time, these are symptoms, signs, symbols of a cognitive decline in Alzheimer patients. Obviously, I'm not a doctor, but this is common sense that this is what happens when you're unable to think clearly anymore and you used to be able to. You become frustrated. And sometimes that frustration manifests in violent outbursts, in rage, in confusion. All of the symptoms that Donald Trump displays on a daily basis. Tim Walz is right to ask these questions. It's not normal behavior, the ranting, the lunacy. It's not normal. It's not healthy. And more pointedly, no one in the history of the world has ever had an MRI and had no idea what it was for. The problem lies in the fact that Donald Trump does know what it was for. He's fully aware that he can't walk correctly. He's fallen asleep all the time. He's confused. He doesn't know who people are. He wanders off. We've been seeing this for months and months and months. The problem lies in the fact that I've said multiple times that Donald Trump is surrounded by a cadre of ass kissers who won't say anything against Donald Trump. They won't correct Donald Trump. They won't compel him, beg him, urge him to seek help because they're brown nosers, which is by design. Anyway, what do you think? Very important. This needs to be on everybody's radar. You're the Commander-in-Chief of the United States Armed Forces. When an accusation has been leveled, a serious accusation of the committing of war crimes, and it's days removed from the reporting, and you're like, I just don't know, haven't looked into it. It looks like if someone's going to be labeled a war criminal between the two war criminals that we have in high office right now, Donald Trump, Commander-in-Chief, war criminal, and the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, war criminal and murderer, only one's going to survive. This is cutthroat, running man, survival of the fittest action, and it is going to be Donald Trump, who seems to be poised on the precipice, ready and willing to throw Pete Hegseth right under the bus. Yesterday on Air Force One, on Donald Trump's triumphant return from Washington, D.C. after his weekend away in sunny Florida, he was asked questions about the war crime that was committed. More and more experts are now, you don't have to take my word for it that it was a war crime, even though I've been saying this for a week now. Military lawyers and combat experts, active duty, former military are all saying this is a war crime. If two people clung to life on a burning ship, not in any position to fight back, and they were killed by a second strike, that's a war crime. That is murder. And asked about this on Air Force One, Donald Trump all of a sudden isn't an all-knowing commander-in-chief. He's not calling the shots and pulling the levers. No. Now he's like, I just don't know. But Pete says this. I wouldn't have done this, but Pete says, effectively distancing himself from Pete Hegseth. And I predict soon we'll be throwing him the fuck under the bus. Watch Donald Trump on Air Force One.
Can you talk a little bit about the strikes and the controversy around Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth?
I don't know anything about it. He said he did not say that, and I believe him.
So you don't know if there was
You talking about the two men?
the second strike to kill the two men?
He said he didn't do it. He said he never said it.
Would you be okay with that if he did?
He said he didn't do it, so I don't have to make that
What
decision.
are your thoughts?
Look, the I don't know anything about it excuse just doesn't fly anymore. You're the Commander-in-Chief of the United States Armed Forces. When an accusation has been leveled, a serious accusation of the committing of war crimes, and it's days removed from the reporting, and you're like, I just don't know, haven't looked into it. Not that serious, don't know. But Pete said this, Pete said that, I don't know. I wouldn't have done a second strike. It seems problematic, does it not? The other odd thing, and they wouldn't have known because this was Donald Trump on his way back. It's not like they're in direct communication while Donald Trump is in the middle of a gaggle. But Donald Trump's surrogates were sent out all across the spectrum of news outlets over the weekend. And chief among them, I don't know why, they're constantly going to Markwayne Mullin from Oklahoma, dumbest of the dumb guys. But he had something very curious to say about the use of the military abroad and at home. There's this talk about lethality constantly coming out of the mouth of the credibly accused rapist of women, Pete Hegseth. And it's about lethality, maximizing lethality in our force. And we need to combatize or whatever, all these little Pete-isms and Hegseth-isms that he wants to normalize among our military and the Department of Defense. And Mark Mullin, again, another guy who never served at all, but apparently colors himself some kind of a military expert, is waxing about how lethality will be brought abroad, home and abroad. The United States military will bring their lethal force of sending rounds down range and ending the lives of combatants, will bring that lethality here, inside the borders of the United States of America. Watch dumbest of the dumb guys, Markwayne Mullin.
The president and the Secretary of War has been very clear they're going to use lethality against our enemies, home and abroad. This has been very clear what's going on right now. that the drug organization that is considered a terrorist organization that is flooding our streets with drugs, that's killing Americans every single day, they're being proactive on it. Good on them. Are we doubting that these drug dealers are actually drug dealers? Do we think they're just out there fishing? Do we doubt that this is a terrorist organization that's killing thousands and thousands of people on our streets? What are we questioning here? These individuals don't care about the lives of our friends and families. Why do we care if we take them out in international water? It is a war because they've declared war on our streets, and the President and Secretary HEGSETH is doing exactly what we should be doing, being proactive against our enemies, and that's what they're doing here. And I applaud them for doing something, because the past administration did absolutely nothing why thousands of Americans died on our streets.
Yeah, and I just want to point out that, again, that it's the Republican chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee and the Republican chair of the House Armed Services Committee who say that they want to look at the whole operation, which you just described.
Look, he might be a dumb shit, and to be sure he is. It is inarguable that he is. But when a United States senator, an ally of the President of the United States, a stated ally of the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, when he says the President and the Secretary of War have been clear, they're gonna use lethality against our enemies, home and abroad. Which enemies at home is the United States military going to use lethal force against? Mark Wayne? You can't just chalk this up to misspeaking. He's a seated, elected United States senator. He's no longer a doofusy congressman from Oklahoma. Now he represents the entire state. He's a professional communicator. Should be, right? And he is intimating that the President and Secretary of War, two war criminals, are ready to bring that lethal combat, that killing of enemies at home. Really, what need is there of me to analyze this, to provide commentary? This is scary, disgusting, anti-constitutional, illegal. And while all of the consternation has been going on for the better part of 2 weeks about the calls for United States military members to only follow lawful orders, and you got senators here saying the military is going to bring lethal force against American citizens. What do you think? Again, I don't need to make comments on this. We can leave this to everybody else here. It's pretty self-evident. Can you explain why you would pardon a notorious drug trafficker? I don't know who you're talking about. Are there so many notorious drug traffickers that you're getting ready to pardon or have pardoned that there's too many to count? If you listen to Donald Trump, I think listening to Donald Trump and taking his word for things isn't really going to add up to a lot. You got to watch his actions, and that's what really we're going to be talking about today. But if you listen to Donald Trump, you would believe that he is endeavoring to eradicate drug trafficking and the scourge of drug violence and the entire economy of the global drug market. Single-handedly, he's gonna take care of this for us. So dedicated to the prospect of eradicating drug trafficking that he's willing to commit war crimes in the process. He and Thirsty Pete Hegseth, Rapey Pete Hegseth. And then we find out that he's going to pardon, a full pardon, unconditional pardon, for the former president of Honduras, who is serving a 45-year, ultimately a life sentence, for horrific crimes surrounding drugs. Like an insane amount, 400 tons of cocaine. He was found guilty by a jury of his peers in an investigation and a trial that began when Donald Trump was president and then ended when Joe Biden was president. So this isn't all about, oh, Joe Biden, it's corruption. They can't do that anymore. It started under Donald Trump. But Donald Trump pardoned this guy, and when asked questions about it, he, starts to play dumb and I think realizes, oh, this isn't going to work, and then course corrects and then justifies, acting as though this president, this drug trafficker, was railroaded in his prosecution. Watch this from yesterday on Air Force One.
You made so clear how you want to keep drugs out of the U.S.
Right.
Can you explain more about why you can pardon a notorious drug trafficker?
Well, I don't know who you're talking about. Which
Juan Fernando Hernandez.
Well, I was told, I was asked by Honduras, many of the people of Honduras, they said it was a Biden setup. I don't mean Biden. Look, Biden didn't know he was alive. But it was the people that surround the Resolute desk, surround Biden when he was there, which was about very little time. And the people of Honduras really thought he was set up and it was a terrible thing. He was the president of the country. And they basically said he was a drug dealer because he was the president of the country. And they said it was a Biden administration setup. And I looked at the facts and I agreed with them.
What evidence did you share that he was set up and that he wasn't?
Well, you take a look. I mean, they could say that you take any country you want. If somebody sells drugs in that country, that doesn't mean you arrest the president and put him in jail for the rest of his life.
Don't you love that? Can you explain why you would pardon a notorious drug trafficker? I don't know who you're talking about. You don't know? Are there so many notorious drug traffickers that you're getting ready to pardon or have pardoned that there's too many to count? You got to be more specific than that, sweetheart. Is that what he wants us to believe? Many of the people of Honduras said it was a Biden setup. Yeah, I'm sure all of them are saying, oh, that's a Biden setup. I looked at the facts and agreed with them. What facts? That's the follow-up that was not asked. What evidence can you share that it was a setup? You can take any country you want. If somebody sells drugs in that country, that doesn't mean you arrest the president and put him in jail for the rest of his life. No one says that drugs were sold in the country and then he was arrested for it. He was taking bribes from El Chapo, helping to traffic 400 tons of cocaine. This is a statement from the DOJ, by the way. Juan Orlando Hernandez, former president of Honduras, sentenced to 45 years in prison for conspiring to distribute more than 400 tons of cocaine and related firearms offenses. U.S. Attorney Damian Williams said, as the former two-term president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez had every opportunity to effect positive change for his country. Instead, Hernandez helped to facilitate the importation, of an almost unfathomable 400 tons of cocaine to this country. Billions of individual doses sent to the United States with the protection and support of the former president of Honduras. Now, after years of destructive narco trafficking of the highest imaginable magnitude, Hernandez will spend 45 years where he belongs, in federal prison, said the DOJ at the time, until Donald Trump issued a pardon. I'm going to read a little bit about, because as always, you don't take my word for it. Listen to what I have to say and test the veracity of my remarks. Listen to what others have to say, but decide for yourself. And it's because of the remarks of some of the individuals I'm going to quote from this New York Times article that should lead you to be very dismayed about what is taking place. And also be asking the question, what did Donald Trump get in return for this? Because every pardon we've seen involves something that Donald Trump gets in return. It's bribery is what's taking place right here. Sometimes, I guess, extortion, if they are demanding something in advance of the thing they're going to do for the person. Anyway, here's the headline from the New York Times. Trump announces pardon for Honduran ex-president convicted in drug case. Juan Orlando Hernandez was accused of receiving millions in bribes and partnering with cocaine traffickers. He was convicted in Manhattan in 2024 and sentenced to 45 years in prison. They'd accused him of taking bribes during his campaign from Joaquin Guzman, the notorious former leader of the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico, known as El Chapo, and of running his Central American country like a narco state. The judge in his case, P. Kevin Castell, had called Mr. Hernandez, quote, a two-faced politician hungry for power who masqueraded as an anti-drug crusader while partnering with traffickers. And prosecutors had asked the judge to make sure Mr. Hernandez would die behind bars, citing his abuse of power, connections to violent traffickers, and, quote, the unfathomable destruction caused by cocaine. Now, again, you heard him say, this is the Biden setup, it's a Biden setup, it's a Biden setup. That's deflection. That's a lie. It began under Donald Trump, under his administration. So if it was a setup, the setup was started by Donald Trump himself. The prosecution stretched across Mr. Trump's first term and concluded during Joe Biden's time as president. In the end, Mr. Hernandez was again sentenced to 45 years in prison in federal district court in Manhattan, capping what prosecutors had presented as a sprawling conspiracy. So, before I read two more paragraphs here, we need to keep in mind that Joe Biden doesn't see that someone is convicted. As we're witnessing across all of the cases that are being dismissed and juries are saying no to all across the country that are involving Donald Trump and his prosecution, persecution, punishment, lawfare against Joe Biden and Democrats and perceived enemies, you see that a president can't just order a conviction. We have a jury process. There was a grand jury in this case that saw evidence and saw that evidence was sufficient to send it to a jury for trial. And then in the trial, all of the evidence was laid out and 12 jurors said guilty, unanimously said guilty. Joe Biden didn't flip a switch and see a guilty verdict go off. It's not like a cartoon where you pull the trigger and a big flag comes out that says, boop, convicted. That's not how it works. MAGA, being very illiterate relative to the civics of our country, they just don't know that. A spokesman for the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, where Mr. Hernandez was tried, declined to comment. Of course, working for Donald Trump, they don't want to have anything to do with this. A Drug Enforcement Administration agent who worked on the investigation into Mr. Hernandez and spoke anonymously because he was not authorized to speak publicly about the matter, called the pardon lunacy. Mike Vigil, a former chief on international operations at the same agency, also reacted with disbelief to news of the pardon. Mr. Vigil said the move imperiled the reputation of the United States and its international investigations into drug trafficking. Quote, this action would be nothing short of catastrophic and would destroy the credibility of the United States in the international community, Mr. Vigil said on Friday. And then finally, Mr. Trump's vow to pardon such a high-profile convicted drug trafficker appeared in journalists. New York Times, man. Donald Trump's vow to pardon, it appeared to be in conflict with what his stated objectives are relative to drug trafficking and the stopping of the scourge of drugs. It appeared that way. Get a load of this. Mr. Trump's vow to pardon such a high-profile convicted drug trafficker appeared to contradict the president's campaign to unleash the might of the American military on small boats in the Caribbean and Pacific that his administration says, without evidence, are involved in drug trafficking. That campaign has so far killed more than 80 people since it began in September, and at least 2 of those deaths are being called for to be investigated for as war crimes, as murders on the high seas. So I guess this is a lesson in media literacy and with a critical analysis of how the media talks about things. But also that we're going to have to wait and see where this pans out to see what Donald Trump gains from this pardon. Follow the money, especially where it relates to Donald Trump and his crimes and his profiting off the White House, the presidency, the United States, we the people. What do you think? I invite you to this conversation. We can have it in the comments below. Like and comment and subscribe and share this video. All those things go a long way to help this program and just independent media in general. The more of us there are, the more views and the more eyeballs that we maintain, the fewer are being bamboozled by corporate media. So you could do your part there. You can call the voicemail line, 714-576-4054. And of course, as always, you can email me, daily at Dollemore.com.
There was no process. We were allowing open borders. We were allowing criminals to come into our country.
Cue sarcasm. Why would anybody think that Donald Trump would issue an illegal order to the United States military when he does such a good job of not issuing illegal orders in other parts of the government? End sarcasm. A federal judge, a panel of judges in an appeals court, I think it's the 3rd district, has decided that ALINA HABBA is illegally serving as the U.S. Attorney for New Jersey. Unlawfully serving. That Donald Trump made an unlawful appointment, illegal appointment. And she's still out there making noise, flapping her lips on Fox News about things that are not in her purview as the U.S. Attorney illegally acting U.S. Attorney for the District of New Jersey. Here's from CNN. Former Trump personal lawyer ALINA HABBA is unlawfully serving as the U.S. Attorney for New Jersey, appeals court says. And again, not just one judge, a 3-judge panel unanimously said, this is not how it works. Donald Trump is trying to have it all the ways. A federal appeals court on Monday found ALINA HABBA, President Trump's former personal attorney, is serving unlawfully as U.S. Attorney for New Jersey, dealing a legal blow to the Trump administration that could have far-reaching consequences on other appointments across the country. A panel of 3 appellate judges with the 3rd U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, not 3rd District, 3rd Circuit is what I meant to say, of appeals, upheld a lower, that was from earlier. Earlier, I said the wrong thing, not in this thing. Just keeping you on your toes, I guess. A panel of 3 appellate judges with the 3rd U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals upheld a lower court's finding that the administration violated the law. The administration violated the law. Donald Trump violated the law when it used a series of maneuvers to install HABBA in the position after failing to win Senate support. Quote, under the government's delegation theory, HABBA may avoid the gauntlet of presidential appointment and Senate confirmation and serve as the de facto U.S. attorney indefinitely. The unanimous 3-judge panel wrote, quote, this view is so broad that it bypasses the constitutional appointment and Senate confirmation process entirely. And she's still out there. ALINA HABBA still running her mouth about things that are not in her purview relative to the shooting of the National Guard soldier here in Washington, D.C., not in New Jersey. The National Guard soldier, Sarah Beckstrom, 20 years old, from West Virginia, not from New Jersey. Why would ALINA HABBA, I'm going to stop calling her the U.S. Attorney for New Jersey because she's not. These judges have just ruled she's not the U.S. Attorney. She's just an attorney who I guess hangs around the office. She was on Fox News waxing authoritative about a thing that she has nothing to do with. Watch this.
Is that there was a stringent vetting process under the prior administration, and that in itself is flawed. There was no process. We were allowing open borders. We were allowing criminals to come into our country, and then there were individuals that were saying that this should be a safe harbor, a safe haven. Why? America is America because we protect our own. We don't allow this to happen. So when you say we, I want to be very clear. It is not a we. It is not the Trump administration. It was not Trump 1, and it is most certainly not Trump administration that is currently happening. It was the Biden administration that allowed this individual in, that didn't properly vet them, and now an individual who stepped in for someone on Thanksgiving so they could go home, who got sworn in the day prior, is now dead. A 20-year-old is dead. And that is why we fight so hard every day at this Department of Justice.
You, ALINA HABBA, you're not the U.S. Attorney for the District of New Jersey. You're unlawfully there. I don't know why they would have you in the office. But 2, you're not, even if you were legally appointed to that position as an interim or an acting U.S. attorney, you're not a spokesperson for the administration. You work within the Department of Justice. You work for Pam Bondi. Now, of course, that is within it's kind of a nebulous area where they're in the judiciary, but also they work for the executive branch of the government. But even under that, if I'm straining my brain and moving into this weird shadowy area, she's still not a spokesman. She wants to be ALINA, or she wants to be Caroline Leavitt so badly that she's scheduling, I would bet, my guess would be, people in the White House are like, hey, why is she scheduling interviews and talking about this? This is not her job. We put her in there to be something else. I think even this administration is a little bothered by the hubris of this dipshit. ALINA HABBA. Anyway, what do you think? I invite you to this conversation. We are in a situation where they are getting more brazen, more unhinged in their decision-making, more flagrant in their violation of the United States Constitution, of their ignoring of court orders, whether that be district court judges or circuit court appeals courts, or even the Supreme Court of the United States. They've gone through spats of ignoring orders from them. If you remember the illegal removal and refusal to bring back Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Anyway, it's not only going to be the judiciary that saves us. It cannot be. It's certainly not going to be the Congress that saves us. Not until after the midterms, when we have a strong Democratic majority, which it looks like things are shaping up to be good in that regard. But it's going to take our effort. It's going to take our organization to get out there in the streets, to get out there and protest, to be calling your members of Congress, to be talking to your neighbors and your friends and your acquaintances, to get active and organized in politics in a manner that you really never have, because our country, the survival of our nation literally hangs in the balance. Anyway, I don't want to be overwrought about it, but these are things that I believe are very important and real. Very, very real, clear and present danger posed by Donald Trump and the Christian nationalist wackos that he has around him. Anyway, what do you think? I invite you to this conversation. Let's have it in the comments below the video, wherever you're watching it.
The vetting process all happened under Joe Biden's administration.
But was he vetted when he was granted asylum? Are you saying he wasn't vetted when he was granted asylum?
You can tell when Trump people have nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, because they start giving nonsensical excuses for their behavior and to try to deflect from the blame that squarely falls on their shoulders. Kristi Noem was on 2 different Sunday shows yesterday. Meet the Press and This Week with Jonathan Karl. I guess George Stephanopoulos is out. Stephanopoulos is out. So I want to go over this. One, this is going to be kind of a media critique, a little bit of commentary on how they're doing their jobs. I've long held the position that since Tim Russert, we've really not had a good host of Meet the Press on NBC. God rest his soul. We had Chuck Todd we had David Gregory for a while, and then Chuck Todd, and now we have Kristen Welker. None of them are doing their fucking jobs. None of them are asking the correct follow-ups. None are asking even the correct questions. And look, I know it's a tough job. It's got to be nearly impossible, but that's why you need an impossibly talented person to do the job that has so much importance. So much credibility is under the masthead of Meet the Press. It takes someone special to do this job. I'm not up to the task. I'm not saying, well, I could do this. No, I could do a better job than Kristen Welker. Certainly not like Tim Russert. So let's start with this very first clip. And let me start by saying this. I know I've gone on here. It's a minute and 45 in, and I'm just getting to it. They want you to believe, relative to the shooting of Sarah Beckstrom from West Virginia, 20 years old, the National Guard soldier who was murdered here in Washington, D.C. They want you to believe that Joe Biden provided no vetting whatsoever of the individual who is alleged to have killed her. None. No vetting. That's what she says. What vetting did the Trump administration do before giving the suspect asylum? Joe Biden completely did not vet any of these individuals, did not vet this individual. They want you to believe that, and that when Donald Trump granted him asylum, they went through the file. They went, well, this person's going to be, we're going to maybe give him asylum to the United States. Let's see what kind of vetting was done. Joe Biden didn't do any vetting. All right. Approved, he has asylum. That's what they want you to believe, because that is the very best narrative that they can spin relative to their absolute participation in what took place. Not only the deployment of the National Guard to Washington, D.C., where they are unneeded, unwanted, but also the fact that they granted asylum to the guy who they alleged to pull the trigger. I believe he did it. We'll have to follow the case. But that's what they want you to believe. So that's what this first clip is. Watch this, and then we'll move on.
Now, when we vet individuals under this administration, we know who they are, why they are here, and going through that. Unfortunately, this individual, that entire process happened under Joe Biden's watch.
Well, but just to be very clear, I want to go back to what happened on the Trump administration's watch. He was extensively vetted in order to serve alongside U.S. service members as a part of the CIA-trained strike force. But in terms of what happened on the Trump administration's watch, just to be very clear, what vetting did the Trump administration do before giving this suspect asylum?
The vetting process, Kristen, happens when the person comes into the country, and Joe Biden completely did not vet any of these individuals, did not vet this individual.
You heard it. No vetting. No vetting. Joe Biden gave no vetting. Now, I'm going to play one more clip from Meet the Press. We'll talk about it a little bit. Then we're going to move on to when she was on This Week with Jonathan Karl. And her story kind of evolved from the Meet the Press visit, the interview on Meet the Press. Her story started getting a little bit more believable, maybe, because they're starting to hone in on the things that are just unbelievable and stupid and don't line up. Watch this second clip from Meet the Press.
That's the Biden administration's responsibility. This is the consequences of the dangerous situation he put our country in when he allowed those people to infiltrate our country during that abandonment of Afghanistan. And that's why I'm so grateful we have a president now that isn't going to allow it to happen, that he now has put in place measures under his watch at the Department of Homeland Security that we are bringing in new information on vetting, new information to use, such as what do they do on Facebook? What do they do on TikTok and other social media platforms? And who are they talking to? Who are their conversations with? And we use their biometric data information now to track to make sure they are who they say they are, and they're here for their right intentions.
And we are going to talk about some of the steps the president is taking, but I just want to be very clear about this, because his asylum was approved in April of this year on the Trump administration's watch. So just to be very clear, was there a vetting process in place to approve that asylum request?
Yeah, the vetting process all happened under Joe Biden's administration.
But was he vetted when he was granted asylum? Are you saying he wasn't vetted when he was granted asylum?
Vetting is happening when they come into the country, and that was completely abandoned under Joe Biden's administration.
You heard the first clip. You heard it. Joe Biden completely did not vet any of these individuals, did not vet this individual, but also the vetting process all happened under Joe Biden's administration. I thought they weren't vetted, but the vetting process was. You gotta, at least in the same interview, you gotta keep the story straight. Kristi, Noem, are you being poisoned by the fillers and the wax and the lips and the hair plugs and the nonsense? Are you being poisoned? Should we send help? Kristi, Noem. Vetting is happening when they come into the country, and that was completely abandoned under Joe Biden's administration. So in the same little set of clips here, these went back to back, by the way. No vetting, and then also no vetting again. You got to get it straight. It got a little better with Jonathan Karl. He started asking some of the right questions, pointing out some of the inconsistencies, but it still didn't get much better. Watch this.
you said that he was radicalized here in the United States. He was admitted to this country by the Biden administration. That's 100% correct, 2021. But he was granted asylum by the Trump administration in April. So did you see any red
now,
flags?
If you remember, John.
Yeah, did you see any red flags?
John, all the information that was gathered on that vetting process was gathered under the Biden administration. His asylum claim application started under the Biden administration. That information was provided by them, and the responsibility lies with them. And we need to know that and speak the truth of how this entire process happened so that we can fix it. That's what President Trump has been doing and dedicated to, is that when we look at people who deserve asylum, they have to be thoroughly vetted. They weren't under the last administration. That has completely changed under President Trump.
But again, he was granted asylum in April, so President Trump had already been in office for several months. You had been in office. Are you saying there was no vetting done by the Trump administration? You were simply relying on what had been done under the Biden administration? You did no vetting before granting him asylum?
The processes were put in place using information that was gathered during the application process that happened under Joe Biden. And that has been completely fixed. And new metrics and new processes have been added under President Trump. He immediately went to work, and we put in place under USCIS the new data and new information that can be gathered, such as communicating with governments, getting information from them, and making sure that biometric information and dates of service match up. Much of the information that was gathered and provided by the Biden administration wasn't thorough and wasn't done. And what kind of a crazy world is it when you have a president that allows millions of people to come into this country unvetted, not knowing who they are, from countries that perpetuate terrorism upon the United States? And when we saw during Operation Allies Welcome was over close to 100,000 people that were allowed to come to the United States, that Joe Biden said, you know what, we'll vet them after they get here. We'll let them into our country, and then we'll vet them after they get here. And then they didn't do it. They didn't do a good job, and it wasn't complete and thorough, and that's what is being fixed right now.
Again, what the Biden administration said actually is that the vetting was done before they came to the United States. But let me ask you about another subject.
Well, I think if you watch what happened unfold,
you just said that's what
watch people pull on.
Biden said. I know, but
you watch people load onto those planes.
They didn't come from those planes directly into the United States. But let me ask you about another question.
During that period of time.
Look, this shouldn't be a situation where we're looking to point fingers and make blame. But if that's the game they want to play, the blame falls on the last person that touched the ball. You gave the guy asylum. And if you believe Joe Biden to be as incompetent as Donald Trump constantly says he is, why would you just go back there and say, oh, well, Joe Biden did it. I'm sure he made all kinds of mistakes, but let's give him asylum. That doesn't make sense either. Either you don't care about the possibility of a terrorist act committed by this person, and you don't care about the loss of life. I guess we're lucky it's only the possibility of 2 individuals who died at his hand. It could have been a more mass casualty situation, right? But if you really claim to want to fight terrorism and keep America safe and law and order, and only I can fix it, well, then only you can fix it. You can't rely on the vetting or non-vetting that was done by Joe Biden, right? And further, do a better job, Kristen Welker. You almost got there, Jonathan Karl. You almost got there. You almost put the pieces together for your audience to hear that the nonsense narrative that they're spinning. What you should do is ask the question, this is what you're saying. Is this what you're saying? Is this what you mean to say? But that didn't happen. They're failing us when they fail at their jobs. The only occupation listed as protected under the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. I'll throw this back in your court. Let's have a conversation about it in the comments. You can also call the voicemail line, 714-576-4054. And of course, as always, you can email me, daily@dollemore.com. Man, it's good to be back on a Monday. Last month of the year. Here we are, December 2025. Can you believe the election was over a year ago? That shit is nuts. Anyway, I love and appreciate you very much. I will see you next time. Until then, be genuine and take care of one another.